McCoy.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. So this is going to be a little bit different type of video that I usually do. It is a full build and paint video, but it's going to be on a character, and as you can see here, I've got a Dewback and Stormtrooper from Star Wars. This is a resin kit that was put out by StannArts Models. And you've got the feet here, which are separate pieces. You've got the main body. You have the base, which is sand and rock. I had previously glued the feet on before I had planned on doing the video. It really is just a beautiful sculpt that StannArts has done. Very nice kit, nicely detailed. Really happy with it, unpainted even. Then you have these saddlebags to go on the side of the Dewback. You have this to be leather strap, which will attach to these little metal rings for bits on the Dewback. And then of course you have the Stormtrooper here, which has to be glued together and then painted, and the backpack for the Stormtrooper. And you'll notice there are some seams here that will need to be filled in with some putty. And then what I'll have to do is resculpt some of the scales to make it look nice and clean and smooth. There's some in the toes here as well. And I'm going to use perfect plastic putty to fill in those gaps. And I'm just going to put some inside here and then smooth it into place with a little tool. And then once it dries, you can see it's dried here. It already is looking a little bit better. But I'm going to have to go in and resculpt some of these scales so that it'll look nice and clean. There's also this big hole in the bottom here, and I'm going to put some tissue in there to fill in the main portion of the hole so I don't use a ton of putty. And then I'll fill in the balance remaining of it with the putty. So here we have it puttied up. You can also see that it doesn't quite sit flush on the base like I would like it to. This is the position on the base that I like. I've tried many different positions and I just tend to like this one the best, but none of them it sits perfect. So what I'm going to have to do at this point is I'm going to go in and grind off some of this resin here so that the feet will sit more flush against the base. You can see like where I did there, it allows that toe to sit inside there a little bit better. And then I've also used some putty on the base to heighten some areas as well. We also have these two little pieces here which are handles that go onto the saddle of the Dewback, and I'm going to go ahead and glue those into position and get that out of the way for now. And you can see here with the backpack there's some flashing where it came out of the molds. There's a little bit of spots that are going to need to be sanded and shaved and cleaned up. And you can even see like on these pieces here just a little bit of cleanup that needs to be done. A little bit of seams here on this part. So the pack has been sanded and shaved down and cleaned up. And this piece here, I put a little putty in the corners where there were some bubbles. And my paint job on this will also clean up a lot of the imperfections, but I also don't mind if there are some imperfections since it is a weathered, beaten backpack by a Sand Trooper. So at this point, I'm just going to start putting together the Trooper's pack with some super glue and get that all done and ready for painting. So I've got all the pieces glued together of the pack now. And then I'm going to move on to the Stormtrooper and get him put together. But the first thing I need to do is there's a gap here that needs to be cut out on his left hand for the leather strap going to the Dewback bit. And his right hand needs to be drilled out for his electric stick that he holds. So I'm going to start with the left hand, and I'm just going to use a blade for this portion since it's not perfectly round, and just cut around his fingers and thumb to create the hole for the leather strap to go through for the bit controlling the Dewback. And then I'm going to go on with a 3/32 inch drill bit and drill out a hole in his right hand for the electric stick that he holds to control the Dewback. Then I have an 8-inch aluminum rod here for the stick and these little ends that came, and again I'm going to drill those out with a 3/32 inch bit, the ends of these caps, as you can see, and then they'll just slide right over my 3/32 inch aluminum rod. And there we have the electric stick for the Sand Trooper. And then I've gone and I have glued his legs and arms on, but I'm holding off on gluing the helmet on at this point so I can get it in the position I want at a later point in time. So I've also gone in and applied some putty in the seams of the legs and arms on the Trooper, and then I just need to sand it down and clean it up so I can move on to my priming. And I'm just going to use some sanding sticks and sand down and smooth out the putty between the leg and arm joints. And I'm going to start with my Dewback here, and I'm using a Tamiya fine gray primer to prime the Dewback, and I've got him primed here. And I'm also going to use the same primer to prime the base and to prime the backpacks and thermos that go on the side of the Dewback. For the Stormtrooper, I used a Tamiya fine white primer since he's going to be in white anyway. And then I used an Army Painter matte black primer for the backpack since the backpack is black. And I also used a black primer as well to paint the electric stick for the Sand Trooper. And here I'm just setting my Dewback on my base, which, you know, I grinded down and added some putty, and you can see he sits pretty flush now the way I want him to be sitting. So I'm happy with how that turned out. And I'm going to start by painting my Sand Trooper, going in and painting all the areas black that need to be black, such as the knee joints, you know, elbows, underarms, and all those areas, and everything is painted black here, as you can see. I left a little spot on the bottom unpainted so that I can glue them to the Dewback. But, you know, with a little patience and steady hand, I've gotten all the black areas painted that need to be black. And I happen to have these set of decals left over from my Bandai Sand Trooper, so I'm going to go ahead and use those for his helmet, so I can get all the nice fine detail in the helmet without having to paint that. And then he'll just fit on the Dewback like so, and I kind of want his head looking to the side and down, so this is where I'm going to glue it into position now at this point, which I have gone and done. So now I have my Sand Trooper the way I want him to be. So moving on with the Trooper here, I've got some German gray, and I'm going to make a wash, and I'm going to start out by just doing a wash over the Trooper. I like to use German gray instead of black because I feel like black is too harsh for a wash. German gray makes a nice dark wash without being too deep. And I've gone over him and done a wash. Now I'm going to do some flat earth wash to add some of that dirt, you know, weathering and such from being out in the desert. And I've gone and I've done that, as you can see. And then I'm going to move on with some sand and mud pastels from Tamiya and just start to dirty him up and add dirt and dust and mud all over the uniform from being out in the desert. And I'm also going to do the same on his little pack here. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue that into position on the front of him. Then I've got his electric pike here, and I'm going to go ahead and use some pastels and dirty that up also. And you can see that's been done here, and it looks weathered and beaten. So then I'm going to take some flat white, and I am going to paint the areas of his pack that are supposed to be white. And then some sky gray is what I'm going to use for the areas that are gray in color, which I'm going to do here. And I've got the pack painted up with the areas that need to be painted. And then I'm going to add a piece of hose here, which was not part of the pack, and I'm just going to drill a couple holes in the top of the pack here like you see, and add a hose, because there's actually a hose in the pack that you can see in the film. So I go ahead and glue that into position, and then I'm just going to go over the whole pack with some pastels like I did with the Trooper. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of rust and soot to some of the lighter areas to weather them up. And we've got the pack all weathered up, ready to be attached to the back of the Sand Trooper. And I'm just going to go ahead and apply some super glue here, and we've got it glued to the back of the Trooper. And he is pretty much at this point weathered up and done the way I want him to be, but we'll see if there's any more to do later. Moving on, I'm going to start painting the base. I'm going to start with some chocolate brown and do the deep colors first. Some of the deeper recessed areas I'm going to do with this chocolate brown, and then I'm going to do some lighter areas with some Viejo flat earth. Still some of the recessed areas, but just make them less dark. And then I'm going to cover the entire base with some Viejo sand primer, and this will be the main color, the main sand color, and then the other two colors will just add depth in those certain areas, like you can see right here. I like the way the base has turned out. I like the shades and the texture of the base. It picked up all the shades really well, and it looks really nice, I think, with the three colors that I've used. So finally, moving on to the dewback, I've got these seams here which I puttied, and I just need to go through and use some tools and just kind of rescribe in the scales. And so I'm just going to use some sculpting tools I've got here and just kind of carve away at the putty, and as best as I can try to rescale it so that I can prime these areas. And you can see here where I've reprimed, and it looks pretty decent. I'm not a sculptor, but it looks pretty good. And for the main body color, I'm going to use some Viejo flat green and flat earth, and I'm going to do my own mixture, which I've done here, kind of a green tint to this brown. And this is going to be the main body color that I'm going to use for my dewback. And I'm just going to go over the entire body here and paint him up with this color that I've created. And I like this shade of color. I like the way it looks. Then I'm going to add just a touch of chocolate brown to my mix I've already done to darken it up, and just go over some of the recessed areas just to shade them a bit. And then I'm going to cover the entire thing with a clear coat of Tamiya, which I've done here, so that I can go start doing some washes, which I'm going to use German gray and chocolate brown. And I'm going to just add a touch of the German gray to the brown just to darken that up a bit, and go over the body and do a wash to highlight the recessed areas of all the scales throughout the body. Some areas will be a little browner than others. It just depends on how much of the gray I add to it. And I've gone and I've done the wash over the entire body now, and I like the way this is starting to turn out. There's definitely a lot of detail here, and you can see these scales on the dewback. Then I've added a touch of sand primer to my mix to lighten it up, and I'm going to start doing some dry brushing over the entire body and start to bring out all the scales and lighten them up. And I'm just going to go around all the areas of the scales, a little bit heavier on the raised areas. And then I'm going to use some sky gray with a touch of flat green that I've added here, and I'm going to do the underside where it's the softer scales, softer body, and just make that a little bit lighter in color. And you can see here how he's starting to come to life, and the underside is a nice lighter color where it's the thinner, softer scales of the body. Now I've got some sky gray here, which I'm going to use for the nails on the feet, and I'm just going to go over all the nails which I've done here with the sky gray. And then I'm going to use some leather brown as a wash and just go over to pick up some of the grooves, add just a touch of yellow to the wash to add a little bit of different color, and just keep going over to the nails. Then I'm moving on to the eyes. I'm just going to do some black here in the eyes to start with. Then I'm going to use some sky gray for the white of the eyes with just a touch of yellow added. I just do the sky gray because white is just too much. And I've painted the whites of the eyes off camera because I was holding it closely to get in there good. And then I'm going to go through with black and do the rest of the eyeball. And that's really making it start to come to life now. Then I'm going to use some Viejo chocolate brown and I'm going to do the pupils of the eyes. And then once that's dried, apply some Tamiya flat black in the center there for the iris. And then go through with some Tamiya gloss and fill in the eyeballs to make them all nice and glossy. Then I'm going to move on to the saddle and I'm going to airbrush some Viejo leather brown onto the saddle. I'm just going to get a nice coating over the whole saddle, even doing it by airbrush as opposed to hand painting. Just be a lot nicer, smoother coating. Then I'm going to go through with a brush and just do the fine detailing around the edges and do the leather straps hanging down and do the leather around his neck. Then I'm going to use some chocolate brown, Viejo chocolate brown, just do a little bit of some subtle shading in the leather there, as you can see, and then do a wash with some chocolate brown and German gray to fill in areas where the stitching has been done around the edges and on the straps. And then I'm going to continue weathering, and I'm looking here where his foot's roughly going to be, and I'm going to put a little bit of marking in here like where his feet might be, and up in the top here where his feet might be rubbing. Then I'm going to lightly dry brush with some sand primer color to add some scuffing all like where the trooper has been riding on the saddle. Then I'm going to go through with some Tamiya pastel, some soot pastel here, just to make up some dirty spots. Then go through with some sand pastel and just make it look sandy and dirty. And here's how that's turning out now. I like the way it's looking. It looks like beaten, worn leather. And this little buckle here, I'm going to paint that black. And then also the bit here for the reins, I'm going to paint black and use this folk art nickel metal paint, and I'm going to paint those to look like they're actual, a metal buckle and a metal bit there. Then I'm going to go through and airbrush the packs with I'm going to use Vallejo leather brown for those, do some sand pastel to detail the edges and highlight, and then a little bit of soot pastel to dirty it up some more. And here's all three of those done up. Then I'm going to glue those into position onto the Dewback here. Then I'm going to go through with some beige brown, slightly different shade, and I'm going to airbrush the pack and canteen that goes on the Dewback. Add a little bit of sand primer to the pack just to give it some various shading there. Then I'm going to go through and paint the straps of the pack using leather brown, and I've also done the same with the canteen here. Then I've given them a clear coat of Tamiya TS13 so that I can go through and do some more washing with a German gray chocolate brown mix that I've done. Highlight the edges here and then rub away the excess, revealing the washing that I've done. And you get the edges that look like this. And I've also done a little bit on the canteen here. Then I've also painted the end of the canteen German gray, and I'm going to use my Tamiya XF16 flat aluminum and paint that to look like a metal cap that he would have on the end. Then I'm going to use this chrome marker that I have and just put a little snap dot on the leather strap that covers the cap. And continue on with some more pastels. I'm going to do some sand pastel over this pack that he's got here, and also over the canteen just to weather and dirty it up a bit. And then glue those into position onto the Dewback. The kit also came with these cotter pins and rings, and these are to put into the bit of the Dewback here. So I'm going to have to drill a hole for these to slide into so that the ring can be here. And then this leather strap will go through the ring, and I'll just pinch it around the edge and glue it. So I'm going to start out by drilling the holes, and you can see those cotter pins and rings fit in there. Then I've gone and painted them with a flat black, and I'm going to use that folk art nickel paint again to make them look metallic. And you can see those hanging here. Then I have pinched the leather strap around. I'm having that held in place with some super glue, and that's all glued and secured. and then I'm just going to put the strap into the bit there. Now you'll notice in this photo of the Sand Trooper, the little handles on the saddle are like fur covered. So I have this bit of stuff from one of my dog's toys that I pulled out, and I've gone and I've used Elmer's glue and just glued those around the posts. And then I have airbrushed them with leather brown. With the feet, I'm going to go through and do some more sand pastel and mud pastel and just kind of dirty them up and make it look like it's been walking through the sand. And I like the way that's looking as well. And I've gone and I've glued the trooper into place on the dewback. And now I've taken the straps on either end and I've glued them together here. And I'm going to take that tip and I'm going to glue it on the underside of the trooper's hand. And I have a little loop I made with this leather strap, and I'm going to glue that into the top of the hand so it looks like he's holding the strap in his hands. And you can see that looping around there. You'll also notice in this photo on his reins, they've been repaired a couple of times, like been wrapped in some type of tape or something like that. So one last modification, I have this self-adhesive gauze which is pretty sticky, and I'm going to cut a couple of really thin strips, run down with a little bit of mud pastel on the edge so that when I wrap it, hopefully you'll see the edges, and go and wrap these around my leather reins and then add some more pastels for weathering, as you can see here. And I've got two on this side, one on the other side, and that would complete this model. So I now present to you my Dewback and Sand Trooper. Hey, if you like watching my videos, please feel free to give them a like. And so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, click subscribe.